We're following this breaking news impacting President Trump's immigration policy. In just the last hour here in New Hampshire, a federal judge issued a nationwide block against the president's order to end birthright citizenship. So that judge granted the plaintiff's bid for class action status, but ruled that the protected class does not include the parents of the children whose citizenship would be threatened. Last month, the Supreme Court limited the power of lower courts to issue nationwide injunctions, but allowed parties to seek a block of the order through class action lawsuits. So then we go to California. Several groups, including the city of Los Angeles, are suing the Trump administration over immigration raids. A hearing on the case will be heard there this afternoon. But joining us now in the studio, we have Paola Ramos, the author and an MSNBC contributor, and Lindsay Kozlowski, president and CEO of the Immigrant Defenders Law Center. So welcome to you both. Lindsay, I want to reach out to you first. So this case in New Hampshire, I know you're not involved in this particular litigation, but give me a sense to your reaction to this ruling.
Well, this is undoubtedly good news for those of us in the immigrant rights movement. With the decision at the Supreme Court, it never said anything about the merits of birthright citizenship. And we know that the plain language of the Constitution says that all children born on U.S. soil are U.S. citizens by birth. That is their birthright. And so this case had to restyle itself after the decision at the Supreme Court that said they could no longer issue these nationwide injunctions. The ACLU and others filed within hours of that Supreme Court decision. This case in New Hampshire restyled as a class action lawsuit. And this morning is a huge win. And it will protect more than 150,000 children that will be born in the U.S. this year and make sure that they are given their constitutional birthright citizenship. It's an important win, and it shows us that when we fight in the courts, despite these limitations being put on us by the Supreme Court, we can still have big wins like the ACLU had this morning in New Hampshire.
Big win, but do you consider it a narrow ruling when we say that the ruling was that the protected class does not include the parents of the children whose citizenship would be threatened? I mean, explain that and how that manifests itself.
So we still don't have the written decision that'll come out later today, but what this is saying is that the protected class are the children who are being born. And so that really has to do with who can bring this lawsuit. But they did certify that class of those children, and it will protect their birthright citizenship. So it is still an important win, but there'll be a lot of legal analysis in the hours and days ahead to look at that case.
So in the court documents, Paola, I want to get this right. The lawyers for the plaintiffs in this case, they wrote tens of thousands of babies and their parents may be exposed to the order's myriad harms in just weeks and need an injunction now. What is your sense to this judge's ruling?
I mean, I think we can anticipate the potential chaos. Now, this idea that you and I are even having a conversation about the fact that potentially at the end of the month, there could be 28 states that start revoking birthright citizenship. What that looks like on the ground is chaos. It looks like a potential new emerging humanitarian crisis within our borders. It looks like then the beginning of potentially mass statelessness. And so the question that haunts me is, for those people that belong nowhere in the eyes of the government, for those people that then cannot be repatriated back to countries, say Venezuela or Cuba, what happens to them? What is the administration capable of doing to people like that?
Wait, what does happen to them?
Well, that's the question. I don't know, right? Because precisely the 14th Amendment was written so that we would never be able to have this conversation, right? So that no executive power, no person, no sole institution could ever lead us to this conversation where suddenly citizenship could be defined by race, by heritage, or blood, which is something that, for instance, J.D. Vance is actively doing. But here we are. And so that is the question that haunts me. The most terrible form of cruelty is when you're able to dehumanize people. And so if the administration suddenly deprives people of their citizenship and their statelessness, what do? What happens to them? I don't know.
I would ask Lindsay the question, but I'm sure she doesn't know either. So I do want to ask you about another hearing that we're keeping an eye on. This one in Los Angeles, Lindsay. We have several organizations there, including your group and the state of California, suing the Trump administration over immigration raids across the city. And I know you've been representing people that were caught up in these raids. What are they experiencing?
What is happening in Los Angeles is truly unprecedented. We have the political theater of troops in the streets.
See, Trump suffered a pretty big legal defeat there in the lower courts, but this has Supreme Court implications as well. And there was a Supreme Court defeat for Trump and the Trump movement that's sort of flying under the radar. But this is critical because, look, we're not going to excuse the Supreme Court, but I want you to understand the depth of Trump's totalitarian mindset. Because for normal people like you, I'd like to think myself a little bit normal, at least somewhat normal, not totally crazy, but for normal-ish people, they look at the Supreme Court and they say that there are 6 Trump sycophants to varying degrees, not all of them equal. Ironic as it is, the 2 biggest Trump sycophants weren't appointed by Trump, Alito and Thomas, right? But, 6 people, at least 5, that are totally in the tank for Trump, and every once in a while they'll vote against him, sometimes on important cases. But Trump and his people see those small instances, the 15-20% of the time that Trump is opposed, and they see that as proof that the Supreme Court is secretly a conspiracy against Trump. And it's this conspiratorial mindset that leads them into attacking Comey, and this connects directly to their approach failing inside courtrooms. Look at this.
The Trump Justice Department. There are people who believe this story was leaked this week as a sort of bright, shiny object designed to distract attention from what is an avalanche of criticism being directed at Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel over an entirely different issue, and that's their failure to deliver on MAGA conspiracy theories related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Remember, they announced last week that there was no secret Epstein client list, no one would be charged, and no further documents would be released. This has caused a firestorm among Trump supporters. Bondi posted a video on X yesterday about her lawsuit against California over trans women in sports, and her post drew 10,000 comments, most of which seem to be criticizing her over the Epstein matter. So they are in some serious hot water over that. Chris.
Well, let me ask you about that, if I can, Ashley. As someone who has covered the administration so closely and covered Donald Trump for such a very long time, does this feel to you like something meant to distract from the problems they're having with the MAGA base, give them something that they can get behind?
So yes is the short answer, with a certain amount of caveats. It is incredibly helpful for Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, who are and Dan Bongino, who are in the middle of some very tough news cycles with their own base. And this is a base, again, who is still a little reluctant to take out their frustrations on Trump himself. So almost all of this ire is directed at these people one rung down. From their point of view, this is potentially a very effective distraction, because John Brennan and Jim Comey are sort of 2 well-known villains of the MAGA base, and you now have the Trump Justice Department taking potential action against them, although there is the very real possibility that this ends in the same way that the Epstein case does, which is sort of for the MAGA base, an unsatisfying dud. The only caveat I will say is that Trump he seems like a master of distraction, and he is. And people often ask, why would he replace one scandal with another or one controversy with another? And sometimes, not always, but especially from Trump himself, sometimes the result is distraction, but it's less the product of a grand strategy and 4-dimensional chess and more the result of just sort of careening from one bullet point to the next.
Well, let me ask you about something that was just up in The Atlantic from your colleagues about the CIA note, as it is known, from Director John Ratcliffe, which publicly accuses Comey, Brennan, and former DNI James Clapper of manipulating intelligence in the Russia investigation 8 years ago. No new evidence, as the article points out, to back that up. Why do these things keep coming up over and over and over again in the face of absolutely no evidence that has been ever published or no charges that have been brought?
Well, again, these people are well-known, well-trod boogeymen for the president and his base. And Donald Trump came into office campaigning quite clearly on extracting revenge and retribution. And so in some cases, what you are seeing are his deputies doing his bidding or doing what they think he would like them to do. And one thing we've learned about Trump, too, is if you are a cabinet official or you are a top advisor and you are in a bit of hot water with him, for whatever reason, the most effective thing you can do, as we saw Pete Hegseth do in a news conference the other day, is, for instance, come out and attack the media or attack one of these people who he has railed against, you know, really for the better part of a decade. That is an effective way to buy yourself a little more time.
Let me ask you in the minute we have left, Michael. I mean, people might say, okay, Comey and Brennan, they've looked at this again and again and again. They've come up with nothing, no big deal. But based on what we know about these types of investigation, what does it mean for the individuals, for their lives, for their families' lives, and frankly, for their bank accounts?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we don't know, and it's the specter of criminality. And Donald Trump seems to understand that better than most politicians, that if he can take the question of criminality and cast that shadow on someone, that it is something that weighs down on that person. It politically drives people against them, and it is a very I think for individuals a fairly scary thing. Now, Brennan and Comey are a little different than sort of your average person in the fact that they have great means, they've led powerful institutions, they're effective operators on a national level. So in that sense, they've seen this movie before. But at the same time, they now find themselves having to deal with this again. And if you are a family member of theirs, or if you are them themselves, it just creates these questions. What is going to happen next? And Trump has learned over his time in office that the specter of criminality is something that's very powerful. Indeed, here we are talking about them as if they, you know, are in deep trouble.
There was this court case in Florida, right? Florida was trying to effectively criminalize undocumented people, and the Supreme Court blocked that. Now, Trump isn't happy about that because even though that's, you know, it's a state and it's a jurisdictional issue, one of the reasons Trump loves the right-wing court system is that it allows the states to also effectively do federal policy. It means that every single right-wing attorney general, every single Republican attorney general in the country, let's say from Texas or from Florida or from any other red state where they have like a really insane AG, they can effectively use a stacked court system to go after federal policy. So Trump doesn't need to do it via an executive order. Trump doesn't even need to do it via, you know, the House and Senate passing a bill that he signs. He can get an AG from Nebraska to go in and say, hey, I want you to say this bill is this law that we don't like is unconstitutional, and then it's off my table. It's like I did all the work and I didn't have to do any of the work. And he took a big loss today, or at least yesterday, in that case.